In the paper arts world, ephemera is one of the most used words and one of the least understood. It's being used two different ways right now, and depending on which one you've picked up, you might be thinking about your materials in a way that makes things harder than they need to be. In this video, I'm talking about the original meaning, how the craft world has changed it, and why that difference actually matters when you sit down to work. So first, where does the word even come from? It comes from Greek, and it literally means lasting only a day. It was used to describe paper objects that were made for one single job, like a ticket that gets you through a door, a receipt that confirms a purchase, an advertisement that promotes a sale that's happening this week, or a label that told you what was in the tin. Nobody saved any of it. The job was done, and the paper was done. Here's some examples. Postage stamps, postmarks, old trade cards, receipts, envelopes, tickets. None of it was made to be art, and none of it was made to last. And that's what makes it so interesting in your work. When you put a library checkout card from 1947 on a page, you don't need to explain it. The person who's looking at this is the one who fills in the story themselves. How many people checked out this book? Over what periods of time? What the world could have been like at that time? Decorative paper can't do that, and pattern paper is beautiful, but it doesn't carry a story the way that ephemera does. That's what gives your collage an emotional weight you didn't have to create yourself. And there's also something worth thinking about here. These objects were made to be thrown away on purpose. And yet, here they are, sometimes more than 100 years later. So when you put them into something that you've made, you're giving them a new life. You're the last stop on a very long trip that no one planned. Now, here's where it gets interesting for us specifically. If you've ever bought an ephemera kit on Etsy or heard someone describe a rubber stamped piece of paper as ephemera, that's a different definition, and it's not wrong. In junk journaling, collage, and scrapbooking, ephemera has come to mean something wider, and that is anything that has the look and feel of age, texture, and history. Something that seems like it had a life before it landed on your page, and that includes things made to look that way, even if they were printed yesterday. Here's a simple way to think about it. The original definition tells you what ephemera is, and the craft community definition tells you what ephemera does. And what it does is bring a sense of story to your page, whether that story is real or just suggested. For the rest of this video, I'm working with both. When I talk about finding ephemera, I mean the real vintage material. When I talk about making it yourself, we're in that wider creative space, and both belong here. So, where do you actually find it? My suggestions are estate sales, flea markets, and antique malls. You can find things like old letters, handwritten notes, receipts, trade cards, old envelopes, and depending where you are, some of these things are easier to find than others. Antique malls tend to be a little bit more expensive, but you can pick things up and actually touch them and look at them before you decide if you want to buy something or not, and sometimes that can matter. Stamp clubs has been one of my best resources. There's just a lot of stamps out there, and so they're pretty inexpensive to get a good amount, a bunch of or a bag of some loose stamps. Old postmarks and cancellations on envelopes are honestly some of my favorite things to work with. And Etsy is also worth knowing about too. You can find packets of vintage ephemera already put together, often around a specific theme like birds, for example, which is handy when your own stash isn't quite what you need. One quick thing worth saying: old books, sheet music, maps, all of these things I love to use, and I use them all the time, but they're not really ephemera. A book was made to be kept and used for a long time, and that's actually the opposite of what makes something ephemera. In our community, these things often get lumped together, and that's fine in practice, but ephemera especially means the stuff that was never supposed to survive. Now, before we get to making your own ephemera, if you're enjoying this video, please hit the like button so that it can spread to others, and consider subscribing if you like this kind of content. Thank you. Now, if you want to make your own, the first thing I want to show you is examples with rubber stamping. You'll probably notice this mark on my hand. I burnt my hand while I was ironing. I think the universe was trying to teach me a lesson. Don't iron ever. Something like that. But anyway, it doesn't hurt. It just looks ugly. So sorry about that. All right, rubber stamps. So a really cool thing to do is when you have leftover scraps from a project or a page that you would normally throw away, save them to use with rubber stamping. Here I've just got one with some text on it. And one of the cool things with rubber stamping is that you can change the direction of your collage by choosing the color ink that you want to use. Say, for example, that you have this piece of washi tape, right? And these are basically your color palette. So I'm just going to put that there for a second. So now, what color would I choose to match that or to complement that? Would I choose purple or aqua? No. Maybe this nautical blue? Absolutely. Maybe something red, or maybe something black. Probably I'd go with the black. So I will use black. And then stamp this. I don't want to get this table dirty. Just try it like this. There. And so now I have black ink that I can use with my washi tape, right? And it's on a vintage piece of paper. You can see that the color is just slightly different than, say, copy paper, right? And maybe that's all you need, is just that slight variation in color to give it the effect that it's a vintage piece of paper. You can also stamp on something like tea bag. I drink black tea every single day, so I have loads of these tea bags, and they're so nice to use because obviously the texture is different. And then there's that little bit of extra dark color on the sides. Again, you can choose whatever color ink you want, and that's going to kind of pull things together when they are complementing each other. Don't forget that you can use your own handwriting on a vintage piece of paper, and how you choose to write something is also going to give it a mood or a feeling, depending on what you do. If you do a bunch of random letters or numbers that's not really a word, but maybe it looks like a secret code, that's interesting. If you use calligraphy, oh my gosh, that's, of course, beautiful. Or even just cursive, beautiful cursive writing. And it could be, that you're just practicing and you use something, a piece, right? Or use your left hand and see what happens when you try and write something out. It's not going to look like your normal handwriting, right? All those things give it character. And depending on the type of paper you use, it can make it really look vintage. What I hope you're walking away with isn't a strict definition to check yourself against. It's more of a way of looking at things. Because once you understand what ephemera actually is, once you get that these were plain everyday documents that were never supposed to make it, it changes how you feel when you have one and you are able to incorporate it into your art. That library checkout card, that canceled stamp, that trade card from a shop that's been closed for 100 years, none of that was supposed to last. And yet, here you are, giving it one more life in something that you've made yourself. That's not a small thing. If this helped clear something up for you, let me know in the comments. And I'd love to know, how were you using this word before this video? The original way, the craft community way, or something in between? If you want to see the style of journal where I use a lot of vintage ephemera, that's in this video right here. This journal is probably my favorite style. So check it out. It's going to give you lots of ideas. Bye for now.